Have you ever wondered how small mistakes lead to major disasters? Today, we dive into the tragic PIA Flight 268 crash. This incident occurred in the towering Himalayan mountains near Kathmandu. In 1992, a Pakistan International Airlines jet was approaching for landing. Just a simple mistake would change everything. The pilots misinterpreted altitude data shown on their navigation chart. This error led them dangerously close to the mountains. As they descended, the aircraft drifted too low. It was a routine flight, until it wasn't. Suddenly, the flight collided with a mountainside. People on board were caught completely off guard. Pilot error and unclear navigation charts resulted in the disaster. It serves as a pivotal lesson in aviation safety. Let's break down what went wrong step by step. First, the pilots relied heavily on their charts. Next, the flight crew miscalculated the necessary altitude for approach. They ignored crucial warnings from their flight instruments. Additionally, the mountainous terrain added complexity to their landing. Imagine driving on a winding road without clear signs. That's what this crew faced. Inserting navigational errors can be catastrophic. Proper training and adherence to protocols are vital. For example, a few extra feet in altitude could have saved lives. A simple check of their instruments might have changed the outcome. This incident highlights how critical every detail is in aviation. Just one small misjudgment can lead to immense consequences. In summary, the PIA Flight 268 crash showcases the importance of accuracy in navigation. It reminds us of the human factor in aviation safety. Understanding this tragedy helps us ensure better safety measures today. What can you do? Stay informed about aviation safety and share this lesson. Together, we can keep flying safe. Subscribe for more aviation insights. As we explore the events preceding the crash, we must consider the cockpit environment. The pilots were under considerable pressure during their descent. Factors such as time constraints and communication challenges amplified their stress levels, making it harder to think clearly. The cockpit was filled with a cacophony of alarms and beeping instruments that should have signaled caution. Each warning was a cry for attention, yet the mounting stress dulled the crew's response. As the terrain rose ominously around them, the pilots exchanged a quick glance, silently questioning if they were truly on the correct path. Moments of doubt crept in, and rather than verifying their altitude readings, they pressed onward, confident in their experience rather than the facts presented to them. The flight crew's reliance on instinct over instruments could be seen as a betrayal of their training. Their confidence misled them into a false sense of security, which ultimately clouded their judgment. As they descended further, the mountains loomed closer, each second stretching the tension in the cockpit. The moment of decision drew near, yet the pilots held fast, guessing the altitude rather than confirming it. One pilot's voice broke the uneasy silence, suggesting a last-minute review of their navigation. It was a fleeting thought, quickly overshadowed by the urgency of the approach. What they needed was clarity, but instead, they were ensnared by the weight of expectation and the ticking clock. Unbeknownst to them, their final seconds were slipping away as they continued into perilous territory, the mountains waiting to claim their tragic miscalculation. As they approached the final descent, the pilots clung to their instincts while the instruments continued to warn them, their beeps now a desperate plea for immediate action. The lead pilot glanced once more at the navigation display, confused by the numbers that seemed to flicker with urgency. "Are we sure about this altitude?" he asked, his voice laced with a mix of doubt and hope, seeking reassurance in the chaotic environment. His co-pilot hesitated, glancing again at the chart, the realization dawning that something felt dangerously amiss, yet the weight of their decision loomed larger than the mountains that surrounded them. "Let's just keep our course steady," the co-pilot finally replied, masking his unease with bravado. Their shared silence thickened, an unspoken acknowledgement of the mistakes stacking against them. As the aircraft plunged toward its fate, the unforgiving terrain closed in around them, swallowing any chance for escape. In those final moments, the realization that their choices had led them astray crystallized painfully. The lessons of PIA Flight 268 echo in aviation history, underscoring the vital importance of vigilance and accuracy in every flight. The cockpit atmosphere thickened as the flight crew faced the mounting tension of their descent. With whispers of concern shared between the pilots, moments transformed into frantic seconds that would ultimately define their fate. "We've got to trust the instruments," the lead pilot insisted, desperation creeping into his tone as he felt the weight of the situation pressing down. "We're experienced, we'll make this," the co-pilot replied, battling internal doubts while forcing a sense of confidence into his voice. Outside, the majesty of the Himalayan peaks surged into view, a stark contrast to the anxiety unfolding within the cockpit. The navigational instruments flickered ominously, yet an unsettling silence loomed as the pilots chose instinct over the hard data before them. Every heartbeat echoed the risk they were taking, and with each passing moment, the vulnerability of their choices became glaringly apparent. The mountain ridges edged closer, and as the seconds ticked away, there was no turning back. In the near silence, a deep-seated worry began to surface, a creeping fear of the consequences of their decision. Would they heed the instruments, or would they gamble with fate? The weight of their actions soon would be felt, but at that moment, they remained ensnared in a deadly dance with danger, propelled by a belief they could still turn things around. As the aircraft continued its descent, the sky above them darkened, and the air seemed to thicken with the weight of impending doom. The lead pilot's breaths quickened, and he studied his instruments again, trying to grasp the altitude that eluded them. "We need to adjust our approach," he urged, though doubt gnawed at him as silence enveloped the cockpit. The co-pilot nodded, his hands twitching on the yoke, torn between the urge to act and a sinking realization that time was slipping away. "It feels like we're too low," he muttered, unable to shake the unsettling thought that they might have miscalculated their trajectory. They exchanged worried glances, and for a moment, reality hung heavily in the air, a palpable tension that neither could shake off. As the mountains loomed ever closer, the conflicting instincts of experience and doubt warred within them, feeding their urgency as each second churned like the turbulent skies around. Yet, their final call came too late, the mountains now an inevitable conclusion to their tragic misstep. The cockpit clocks steadily ticked on, counting down the moments they had left. "What if we pull up now?" the lead pilot proposed, his voice trembling with urgency, grappling with the critical juncture they faced. "We wouldn't make it in time," the co-pilot shot back, his eyes wide, grappling with the weight of their collective decision-making. The realization hit like a thunderclap, their arguments and doubts were overshadowed by the roaring mountains outside the cockpit. The stakes were unbearably high, and yet their minds raced yet remained clouded. "We have to make a decision," the lead pilot insisted, desperation tightening his throat as they weighed the options. The dialogue between them reflected a haunting truth: both men had become captives of the situation, trapped in their choices as the aircraft fell deeper into peril. Unbeknownst to them, the closing distance between the plane and the unforgiving terrain loomed with insatiable hunger, hungry for a reckoning. They could only hope for a miracle, but in truth, they needed to recognize their predicament before it was too late. The pilots were now swallowed by a growing sense of inevitability, their thoughts racing as fleeting seconds slipped through their fingers like grains of sand. "Let's not panic. We can adjust," the lead pilot urged, his voice trembling but still tinged with determination. Yet, the mountains continued to surge toward them, each ridge a stark reminder of their critical miscalculation. In that moment, regret intertwined with fear, each pilot wrestling with the knowledge that the choice to trust their instincts had pushed them toward disaster. "I should have considered the approach more carefully," the co-pilot confessed, a shudder of realization coursing through him as the cockpit filled with the shrill alarms signaling their impending fate. Instantaneously, a sense of urgency ignited the air between them, each man grasping the suffocating truth: they were on the precipice of tragedy, and time had run out. As the instruments blared louder, drowning out their thoughts, the lawyers of fate began to weave their final arguments, stitching together a narrative of mistaken judgment and lessons unheeded. The pilots exchanged frantic glances, the gravity of their situation solidifying in their minds. Time was no longer a luxury they could afford. "I never thought we'd end up here," the lead pilot admitted, his voice barely a whisper overwhelmed by the blaring alarms. "It's not over yet," the co-pilot replied, hoping to inject a spark of resolve amid the gnawing despair. Yet, deep down, doubts stampeded through their thoughts, threatening to shatter their remaining confidence. Outside, the mountains rose in menacing shadows, each jagged edge a silent witness to their critical miscalculations. As they prepped for what felt like a final push, they clung to a desperate hope, yet clarity was drowning beneath the weight of their collective failures. The cockpit morphed into a labyrinth of noise and fear, suffocating the flickers of rational thought that begged for attention. Moments transformed painfully into memories that would forever haunt the annals of aviation history, illuminating the stark reality: visibility mattered just as much as instrument readings. At that moment, amidst the terrifying roar of engines and alarms, the fragility of human control in the face of nature's might became devastatingly clear, a truth with consequences that awaited them just beyond the horizon. "We need to trust the data," the lead pilot urged, but his voice trembled with uncertainty, each heartbeat echoing the daunting proximity of the mountains. "I'm not so sure anymore," the co-pilot confessed, his hands gripping the controls tightly, every instinct screaming for a different outcome. In the final milliseconds of their flight, the pilot's world spiraled into chaos. Their navigation blunders, coupled with misplaced confidence, would soon seal their fate. The mountains, towering and unforgiving, stood ready to claim them, an ever-present reminder of the critical importance of caution. This tragic event serves as a profound teaching moment for